My name is Benny Johnson. As some of you know, I've been struggling with addiction. However, I decided to change my life and went into recovery. I've started this podcast 90 Days Clean, and I want to take you along in my journey. What does lie ahead of me? Let me be frank, I do not know. Will I ever drink again? I do not know. This is how Stairway to Redemption was born. It is my search for answer in a real-time process of what is going to work for me. It is then my aspiration to help you figure out what's going to work for you. It is our journey together. Welcome to another episode of Stairway to Redemption. This week, my guest is Eric. Eric is a youth motivational speaker who helps students and student athletes make better, healthy decisions when dealing with adversity in general, but especially with addiction. Eric has a very peculiar and interesting story that I can't wait to dive into. But first, hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yes. So here at Stairway to Redemption, we like to start with the state of the mind address. How are you doing lately? Something beside I'm just fine. A deeper answer than that.
I'm you could say I'm busy. Say that I'm busy. I'm constantly doing stuff, which isn't a bad thing. But yeah, I would say, one word to describe me lately, busy, which I'd rather be than not busy. So I'll take it.
All right. That's definitely true because this episode was long in the making, but I understand, and I listen to your podcast, you're very active, to say the least. And I understand, especially if you talk to a lot of students, a lot of talks, a lot of interventions. I have no doubt that. And thanks again for making the time for me and for my platform.
I'm excited. I'm excited about this.
All right, so let's dive into it. Could you tell us your story? What's your experience with addiction? How did you become a youth motivational speaker?
It's a great question. So how did I become a youth motivational speaker? I became a youth mental health speaker by sitting in my brother's room and, never forgetting the moment when the doctor walked in and said to me and my family, looked at my parents and said, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your brother." And then looked at me and my brothers and said, looked at my parents and said, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your son." And then looked at me and my brothers and said, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your brother." And after we buried him, about a week and a half after that, I just kept thinking to myself, how could my brother have had avoided going down this road? What could he have done differently? And kept coming up with decisions, if he had made better decisions. And one of the things I kept thinking about was, if he had just made the decision to speak up and ask for help from what he was going through, then he wouldn't have been going down this road. So this is what really started my journey of talking to students and student athletes about speaking up and asking for help when they're going through things such as anxiety, depression, substance use, and really educating them on how addiction can affect their life and how it starts. So that's really kind of how it all started for me, was just hearing the doctor say those words. I thought to myself, well, how could he have not gone down this road? And then I thought at the same time, I said, kids need to hear this, because there's so much in the news about youth, about mid-20-year-olds, 30-year-olds struggling with this. And so that's when I started this journey.
All right, interesting. And so to be clear, like you personally, you didn't experience addiction, but it was like your brother who unfortunately passed away from substance abuse, right?
Yes, yes, but I will say this. I'm always
Mm-hmm.
transparent. I'm always transparent about this. I back in the day used to drink, and it got to the point to me to where I just thought it was going down a bad road. So I was never, nobody ever said to me, you have a drinking problem. But for me, I thought to myself, I have addiction in my family, so I'm going to stop. And I haven't drank for the past 5, 6 years just because I didn't see that it was worth it. So I've never experienced substance misuse, no, but I very well could have if I didn't stop that day, I think.
Okay. No, that's very understandable. I believe like in order to even help others, I'm one of those who believe that in order to help others who suffer to addiction, one doesn't necessarily need to have suffered from addictions themselves. Like, from what I hear in your story, and you and your brother, is it fair to say that you suffer a little bit from guilt that you wish you could have done more?
So yeah, but when I will say when he away really struggled with the guilt of why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I do anything? So you're 100% correct in the beginning. I really struggled with that. And I blame myself for him passing away because of these thoughts. Now I realized a little while ago that fault that I didn't make those choices. So that guilt I was able to move past. Beginning though, yeah, as I said, I really felt guilty because I felt like, well, I should have did something, and I should have, but I was able to see that it wasn't my fault. I didn't make him make those choices, and so therefore I didn't do what happened to him to him. He did because he made those decisions. He made those choices.
Mhm. True, true. So then how do you think, because in my experience, uh, in my outpatient program, I have a friend right now who is struggling and that I went inpatient with, and he's much older. He's not like a young youth, but I'm having a hard time to start a conversation with him about, see he's drinking because he automatically shuts off. And I'm tempted to that the last resort I have is to write him out. Like, how do you deal with that how to not wanting to write somebody out,
So here's the thing:
Mm-hmm.
the language, that language right there, is what has put a stigma speaking up to somebody else. So using those words like ratting out, using those words like being a snitch puts a bad label on this. This is only a good thing when you approach an adult, when you approach a friend of theirs and you talk with them about what they're going through. You ask them to be there, to support them, to help them get through this tough moment. So I don't think that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I always say if you know someone who's going through something, say something to someone that could help them. Because if I could go back and do it all over again, that in a heartbeat. I wouldn't care what anybody thought. I wouldn't care the label somebody would have put on me. I would have said something to my parents. I would have said something to one of his teachers, an adult that could have helped him. Because that's ultimately help that person who's going through that tough moment is to approach an adult, again, a friend, and voice your concern.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing. And it's a hard conversation to have. For me, I wanted to say something because I knew my brother was drinking. I knew he was smoking. I knew he was messing around with pills. And eventually I knew he was shooting heroin, but I never said anything because I was so afraid of being labeled a rat, of being labeled a snitch, so afraid of what others would think about me, what they would say, how they would react. And I wish I had had the mindset of I want to help him. see him heal. I want to see him get better. And if I had had that mindset instead of, well, I don't want to be a rat, a snitch, then I firmly believe that he could possibly still be here today. So I would say, I don't think that's last resort. Go right to that. Talk to them at first and see you get help. I want to help you. And if they resist and they continue to make those choices, then I say go to, again, an adult, go to a friend, go to a brother or a sister, somebody that can help them. Because you never know how quickly it can escalate. You never know how far deep in they are. You don't want to take risks. This is what I always say. I always say I'd rather be wrong about someone's going through, talk to somebody about it, versus not say anything and be wrong about it.
Yeah, I get it. No, that's definitely true, because if you are wrong about it, there's still a lot, you there will still be alive. I like that approach. That's true. Next question. What makes addiction in students and the youth in general different from addiction in adulthood, especially how to deal with them?
Well, I'm not going to lie. There's no, I don't see there being a difference. Now, in the sense of how it affects them, yes, it's different in the sense of they may have kids,
Mm-hmm.
they have a significant other. And then they may have a job. Besides that, like that's really it, because the effects are the same, right? You're lying, you may be stealing, and you may be hurting those around you. The effects are exactly the same. It's not like you're younger and it affects you more than if you're older. I guess though, well, I was going to say the one thing that it may affect you differently is with your brain development, depending on
Okay.
how old you are. Because if you're older than 20, I think 21, 25, your brain's fully developed. So it could affect you in that way, but there's still the same symptoms, still the same signs. It's just that that person's older. And again, as I said, they have a job. The
Mm-hmm.
youth doesn't have a job. It's not going to affect their job. And they may have kids, and that younger person may not have kids. But it's pretty genetically similar in the way that it affects that person versus adults. Now, somebody may have different symptoms, but are out there who are adults that have different and the same symptoms. So I don't really see there being that big of a difference at all.
I see. Yeah, I agree. But I was thinking more of because I heard you in one of the podcasts you were a guest on, that reaching the right adult for student, or who suffers from addiction or mental health problem, is very important. So my question
Yeah.
is more on like the approach to um coming and trying to help an adult versus coming trying to help a teenager or
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll break down 4 steps to asking for help. So, and then I'll break it down as a youth and an adult. They're again pretty similar. Maybe minor differences, but pretty similar. So, if we're talking about a student, a youth, then we're talking about you approaching an adult, and
yes.
that can be that person's parents, or it can be their sport coach, it can be a teacher, it can be a counselor, it can be your parents to talk to them, it can be your parents to talk to their parents. Now that's for a youth. For an adult, you could also approach an adult, but they're going to talk to them. You could approach, and that adult could be a friend. It could be a brother. It could be a sister. It even could, depending on how old they are, be their parents. So that's not that much different. But again, if it's a youth, I wouldn't approach their brother or sister. I would approach their parents. I would approach an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. Number two, so now we know, okay, you're going to approach an adult. When we're talking, again, same thing. When we're talking about either a youth or an adult, how do you approach them? How do you start the conversation? And again, this may seem surprising to you, but having this conversation face to face is very nerve-wracking for a lot of people. So not a whole lot of people want to start the conversation face to face. So whether it's an adult or a youth, you can start it face to face if you have that courage, if you have that strength to be able to do that. But if not, if you have the person's email, you can always write them an email. If you have their phone number, you can always text them, you can call them. If they're, you can write them a letter. So there's many different ways that you can approach that person to help that adult or youth. And then now that we know you can approach a trusted adult and you can contact them in these ways, now let's talk about, okay, what do you say in the email, in the DM, in the text, in that letter that you write? And it's just a sentence or two. Just a sentence or two, letting them know what you're going through, how you're feeling, and you want to talk, right? That's the biggest thing, is that you want to talk to them about something that somebody's going through. Or if it's them writing the email or the letter, it's what I'm going through. And it's not paragraphs and paragraphs of everything, because when you meet with them face to face, that's when you can let the guard down. That's when you become vulnerable. That's when you talk about what you're actually going through, your emotions, your feelings, how it's been affecting you. And then number 4, when's the best time to actually ask for help? And I always say, well, you could have asked for help yesterday. You could ask for help tomorrow, but you found an excuse yesterday not to ask for help. You can find an excuse tomorrow not to ask for help. You can find an excuse right now. You're always going to be able to find an excuse as to why you shouldn't ask for help. Oh, this person's busy right now. I'm going to be a burden to them right now. They have a lot going on. This just happened in their life. And so you find a reason not to ask for help. But I always say, is no best time. So ask for help now. Now is the best time, because you're going to be able to find reasons not to.
Totally. That's right. Like, because, I was told when I was impatient, we always win an argument against ourselves, because, how are you going to contradict yourself to like, we can always convince ourselves that we are right, that there's a reason, like you said, you could to not do it today or not do it tomorrow, like not wanting to be a burden that always causes. So like, yeah, I agree. Like, now is always the right time. Now let's jump for a second for like the case of student athletes. In the same podcast, I think it was the Christian recovery. Yeah, you talked that like you brought it something that was very important for me. That like some of those student athletes are really reluctant to talk about their struggle for obvious reason, because they don't want to be taken off the team. It reminds me of when I was impatient. There was one kid who was a student athlete at Syracuse. Unfortunately, he passed away after, a couple months after I got out. But when I asked him, about to tell me his story, he was a case of getting injured, not wanting to be taken off the team, and taking painkillers to hide his injury. I just want to know, how prevalent is like addiction among like that population of student athletes? Like, what did you see?
So I'll tell you this: student athletes are humans just like us. They're no different, and they go through it too. I'll never forget. I spoke to a college hockey team, a Division I college hockey team that every year is running for the national championship. They're in the running for it. And I talk with them. I'm done. And there's this kid. He's like 6'4", 240 pounds, walks in and just starts bawling his eyes out and says, "Can we talk?" And he sits down and he just starts opening up about his mother and her alcoholism and his sister's alcoholism and the injury he's going he didn't make any unhealthy choices, but that just shows you right there that you struggle. They do go through tough moments. They are human.
Mm-hmm.
Stay on the, and that's a big thing too, to stay on the team, to not be taken off the team, or I guess not the right words, but to not be taken out of the lineup, you could say, to not have to be able to sit on the sidelines. They will do whatever they can to be able to get through the injury, the tough moment. And so that may mean them taking painkillers to take that pain away. That might mean them not saying anything about what they're going through to really hide the struggles that they're facing. So I would say that they're human. They go through tough moments like us. And as a matter of fact, they have more pressure than you could say a regular student. Because not only do they have to keep their grades above a certain GPA, but
Mm-hmm.
they're concerned. They're really a lot of emphasis on how they're playing. There's a lot of pressure to play good if they have an agent from their parents, from their coaches. So they have more pressure than a regular student. And important that who are listening to this realize that they're humans too, that just because they're good at a sport doesn't mean they don't struggle. I don't want to say a lot of the times, but there are times when those who are really good at sports and they do feel the pressure. And to relieve that pressure, they may use drugs, they may drink. I've heard of plenty of those stories. So, it's important people understand that athletes go through this too.
Definitely. Like, how much of it you think it's if I don't know, if you were your guess, like how much of those incident is them trying to deal with the injury, or them trying to deal with like the idea that we have about athletes, how do we idolize them in society, especially in American society? How much like
Yeah. I would say, it definitely, I can't put a percentage on it, but I will tell you this. I believe that the pressure, and I could be wrong. So these are my own thoughts. I'm not saying these are correct, but for me, I believe that athletes use alcohol, use drugs to really numb and dull, to mask what they're going through, not in an injury sense, but more so in the sense of not living up to maybe the potential they have, not playing like they can, or maybe something that's going on in their life. I believe that happens more than an injury in painkillers, but I could be wrong. But
yeah.
that's what I believe, is that it's funny, you talk about athletes, and I said that they're human just like us, because I have spoken to athletic teams and athletes every single time I have done it without fail. Every single time, an athlete will come up to me and they'll talk to me about something that they're going through off the ice, the field, or the court, in their family, in their personal life, with a friend, with a brother. So it's I really found that I can't stress this enough. They're human. They go through things. Their families go through things. So I believe that athletes struggle more with things the ice, stay away from the game, in the sense more than injuries.
I see. I understand. I get it. Yeah, that's very interesting. That because I'm not surprised because we just need to watch professional sport to understand that nobody like, and it's very common to see fans of teams to tell other like, oh, just tough it up and like, come and play, like especially when athletes take days off or before like mental health or personal reasons. It infuriates the fans, and I can see how it can start very young in the youth, especially if with student
Mm-hmm.
athletes, to try to cope with something else.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, also too, don't get me wrong, that stress, athlete, especially these young athletes now coming up, right? Being so
Mhm.
young, there's a lot of stress, a lot of pressure on them to perform at a high level early. And so to be able to deal with that, they're using unhealthy escape, to use drugs, to use alcohol. So That's in a sense what I mean about off the ice also too. It might be a small percentage of people who deal with it because of on the ice stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but off the ice of the pressure, the weight of not being able to perform like they want to, all those feelings, I believe most of what athletes really go through and why they make these choices.
Copy, understood. Let's move on to another topic, the depiction of youth addiction in fiction. You know, like those shows like Euphoria, 13 Reasons Why are very popular among young people. Where do you stand on those? Are they for you helpful or dangerous for like the youth at risk?
Do you mean those shows
Yes.
that I just want to make sure I just want to make sure that I'm getting your question correct. So the shows that show other youth that are going through things.
Like Euphoria on HBO, 13 Reasons Why on Netflix. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Euphoria. That's a pretty big one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't I have mixed feelings on them. Like they can be good, but at the same time too, I think that they maybe paint a picture of a stigma that isn't possibly true. And I've never seen Euphoria. I have heard of it. I have been meaning to watch it, but I've never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
So I really can't comment specifically on that. But I do think some of the programs that are out there do a pretty good job of it. But at the same time, too, some programs don't. So I have mixed feelings on it.
For you, what would be like the perfect approach of like depicting addiction in like a high school setting, for example, without glamorizing it? Because people have accused those shows kind of like glamorizing the use of drugs.
Yeah. Well, I will say this,
Mm-hmm.
and talking on that for a sec, glamorizing it, people want to fit in. I always say to youth that when you're in high school, middle school, even in college, you want to fit in. You want to feel like you're a part of a group. And if people are making those choices, you're going to make a lot of people will make them so that they can fit in, right? And they even know that it's not good, that they shouldn't be doing it, but they do it because they just want to fit in. They just want to feel welcomed and be a part of a group of people. So that's how I feel that. But to answer your question, I I don't agree with glamorizing it
Mm-hmm.
and saying, and it's funny because a lot of general shows and movies, I feel like they do glamorize it. And they do, oh, it's cool. It's cool to drink. It's cool to smoke. It's cool to do this. And so I think that that's one of the big problems in America is it's glamorized, and a lot of kids watch TV and they can get that message that, oh, right, well, so and so is doing it on TV, so I'm going to go do it. That's not the right attitude to have, but it definitely plays a part for sure. I think that I'll even go as far as to say, go listen to some rap songs.
Yeah,
Really
true,
go,
true.
really
Yeah.
go listen. Really go listen. Like if you can understand what they're really saying, and I don't think I don't think I'll say adults, meaning those who are most, because some can, but I would say most adults in their 50s, 60s, they'll have a song on in the background. And I'm saying to myself, are you listening to what this person's saying? But they're not, I don't think, familiar with the lingo of what they're saying. Like you listen to a lot of these songs and they're talking about smoking this and smoking that, popping this pill, popping that pill, getting high, getting drunk. And it's just like, so again, once again, just like the movies, you have these artists who were looked up to and they're saying these things and these kids are listening to them and they get what they're saying. They're
Mhm.
giving off the wrong message. So I would even say more so than TV shows, than movies,
No, true.
or
I totally agree
music.
with you. Yeah, like music,
Music.
definitely the
I
glamorization.
mean, like Drake. For example, in one of Drake's songs, And I don't even know, like the interesting thing too is I don't even know if kids really understand what they're hearing when Drake says something like just pop a half a Xan, meaning a Xanax, meaning you take a Xanax and you can get high, you can get messed up, right? So
Yeah,
these artists are just glamorizing it. They're glamorizing it. And yeah, they may be talking about their past, but they're glamorizing it because people are looking up to them.
that's true. Like I agree with you. That's definitely I guess more so like the rappers and the songs, the lyrics are more problematic than some TV shows. But like there's in the same vein that those rappers, you have also a lot of influencers on social media like Andrew Tate and the Paul Brothers that like spew some very dangerous message to the youth. Uh, what was your encounters with social media and the youth at risk? Like the desire to want it to be like, is it something that like you had to deal with when you were trying to intervene with student and student athletes?
I believe that social media can be very good, detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
It can, because I'm sure you've heard this. I hear it a lot from health teachers, from counselors, from just teachers, from parents when I talk with them also that my son, my daughter, self esteem is so to the floor because their friends, their classmates, their teammates have glamorous lives that they're living,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't they don't live that type of life. When the funny thing is, if you were to really get to know that person and the life they live, that's all a facade. They're just
Yes.
putting on this front that they live this life. So that can really affect kids 100%. I have heard it. I have seen it 100%, that social media can be detrimental, but it can also be good. It can also be something positive that you use. So it's all depending on how the person views it, on how they use it. Because again, you've heard of the stories where somebody messages somebody and they get in trouble. Somebody messages somebody, they make them do something, and that person gets arrested for murder or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's all depending on how the person uses it, how they view it. So there's really no one answer. It can be good, it can be bad.
That
But
leads
I will
me.
say,
Go
yep,
ahead.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
finish. No.
Well, I was just gonna say that I think that more so, I think more so it's hurting them.
Yeah.
I would say that. I think more so, and again, this is once again, this is my opinion. I think more so at the end of the day, the social media is hurting our youth, and it's not. I don't think that it is built. They're trying to do that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just happening. That's just how it's affecting them. Is they're really looking at themselves and saying, "I'm not enough. This person is doing this. This person is doing that." Even high school seniors, you're an athlete or you're just a regular student, I know students who get upset because their friends will post something on social media saying, I'm so excited to say that I'm going to Boston College next year.
Yeah.
And they see that and they get really down because they're like, well, I didn't get into Boston College. How did they get into Boston College? Or if they're an athlete and they see their friend announces they're going to go play basketball, hockey, or football at this school, and they're like, oh my God, like, why couldn't I have gotten that scholarship? I'm good enough. And so I personally, it's my personal opinion. Others would definitely say, oh, no, you're wrong. And yeah, it is used for good. But I think at the end of the day that it hurts our youth. And again, I can't stress enough, I don't think it was meant or built for that to happen, but that's my firm belief.
Yeah, I mean that's true because cyber bullying, especially cyber bullying, which is very prevalent nowadays, cannot be, ignored. And this is not per se some bullying, but it's like also the fear of FOMO, the fear of missing out. That I
Oh,
guess
yeah.
Yeah.
for
Hmm.
sure. Like you're at a party and one of your friends sees a Snapchat, sees an Instagram post, a TikTok post about the party, and they're not there, and they see a bunch of people they know where the party is. 100% fear of missing out, no question. And it's funny because you talk about that, people will mess around like, oh, I have FOMO, blah blah blah, but that's a real thing too, right? So people definitely for sure. And that goes back to people just want to fit in, right? So if
Yes.
people just want to fit in, they'll go to that party. They'll want to go. They'll make decisions that maybe they know they shouldn't or they don't want to make, but they want to be a part of the group. Fear of missing out on being a part of a group.
No, totally right. And let's circle back to what you just said because that next question, you might help me with that. Uh, like when you're in high school, college, it's like the crucial exploration period time. Like you say, student trying to figure out who they are, they're trying to fit in. And let me use this analogy with skydiving. If I were to skydive without a parachute, I would certainly die, right? I'm certain of
Yep.
the outcome. Hence, I'm not going to jump out without a parachute. When it comes to drug and alcohol, how do you teach a kid how to evaluate accurately the risk of the action?
So here's the thing. This is the scariest thing about the disease of addiction. You can't accurately assess it because you don't know. That is the scariest thing about this whole thing. And I can't stress that enough is you don't know how it's going to affect you. My
Mhm.
brother, who died from it, was an unbelievable basketball player, soccer player. And growing up, you would never think that he would go through this because our parents, they loved us so much. They just wanted to see us succeed. They did everything they could to see us succeed and be successful in life. So you can't say it's going to affect me because of this, because of that. I mean, for example, I have two brothers. I have one who died, and I have an older brother who is a drug addict. And, for the grace of God, is doing great right now. That he struggled with it. He's doing better, but I don't, right? As I said, I stopped drinking. I stopped using drugs because, not that I stopped using. I didn't use, but I just didn't, I was scared of how it would affect me. And so I
Yeah.
would say that you just don't know. That's the scariest thing. You have no idea. People who are the poster boy or girl for being somebody good, for being an athlete. I have heard the stories that they started drinking and they became an alcoholic. They started using drugs and they became a drug addict or died. So that is the scariest thing is nobody has an answer. You don't know how it's going to affect you. And so when I talk to kids all the time, they're like, well, my friend drinks just my friend drinks and he's fine. And I say, well, now when he's fine, what about 5 or 6 years from now? And how do
Yeah.
you know that how do you know it's gonna affect you like it is him? Right? I mean, somebody I have known and seen, heard of people who have used drugs and have been able to function for years. And then all of a sudden one day they can't function and they lose control of their life and they become addicted to it. I've heard the same thing of alcoholism. People who drink all the time and they're fine as in they're able to function, and then all of a sudden one day it just all falls apart. So, serious thing, you just have no idea. You don't know how it's going to affect you. Everybody's different. You may be someone that people think, oh, if that person uses a drug or drinks, addicted, and you never do. You have to do it for your whole life. But I always say, why risk it, right? Just like we'll go back to your statement. If you jump out of a plane without a parachute, most likely you're going to die.
Hmm.
Maybe you won't, but right. And so why would you risk doing that? Like why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just jump out with the parachute?
Yeah,
Why
exactly.
for me for me I always say why wouldn't you just stay away from it? You know, I mean, if you have to use drugs, if you have to drink to feel good, to let off some stress, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
I think it's a problem. And I think it's a problem. And it's funny too, because people will say, oh, I'm so stressed, I need a glass of wine.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, well, okay, well, I mean, so wine's going to calm you down. That's the answer. That's the answer to it, right? I just think that that's a problem. And I know some people may say, well, I'm just, well, hey, you said it. So,
Yeah. No, I agree. But yeah, do you also think it has to do with the prevention tactics? Because like I don't know if you remember, like there was that old ad, this is your brain on drugs, and it was the fried egg. Like some prevention tactics, I think, were had the opposite effects of
yeah. So
sparing.
I'll say this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this. I agree with that. Some prevention tactics try to scare people. And
Yeah.
then this is what happens. When you try to scare somebody, let's say a middle schooler or a high schooler, and let's say you put up a picture of someone who's addicted and they look horrible. You can tell they're going through something. They look skinny and they just don't look good physically. What happens in a college, a high school, or middle schooler's brain is they say, I don't look like that. I'll never look like that. And so they don't take it seriously because it's like, well, I don't look like that. I don't plan to look like that.
Yeah.
So this is never going to happen to me. I don't think the scare tactics work.
So what would be a good, a different approach that you think is more effective?
Why risk it? Go back to what we just talked about. Why
Mhm.
risk it? You don't know how it's going to affect you. Nobody, and I mean nobody, I can say with 100% guarantee, nobody in their life starts drinking or using drugs and says, I can't wait to ruin my life. I can't wait to become addicted. I can't wait to die. I can't wait to become an alcoholic and lose everything in my life. Nobody makes those choices wanting, hoping, wishing, praying for that to happen, but it does. So we just don't know. I guess I'll just double down on that.
Yeah.
You just don't know. Yeah, my brother didn't say I want to die from a heroin overdose. That's why I'm going to start smoking weed. I'm going to start making these choices. You just don't know. So that would be what I would say to kids is you just don't know. So
Mhm.
many people just, they just turn around not too long after they start making these choices. Their life's completely different. And like, what happened? What happened? You made these choices. You didn't think it happened to you, but it did. That is how this always starts. Always is, I think this would happen to me, but it did.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's we never know. So yeah, so what do you bring? What do you bring on the table? What's your approach to help those students those young individual who suffer? What is it that like you do exactly?
So first, I get them to see that they're worth and that they matter and they're worth having the conversation. They're
Mhm.
worth speaking up and asking for help for. That regardless of the choices that they made in their life, in the past, regardless of how they see themselves or what they think about themselves, they deserve to get help. They deserve to really start healing and dealing with their addiction, with whatever they're going through. And it's beyond addiction. Addiction is a big part of it, but also it's the going through anxiety, going through depression. It's the self-harming, all those things. Regardless of what they're going through, they deserve to get help. They deserve to really start healing and dealing with what they're going through. And again, this is my opinion. I have to state that because some people may take it out of context. It's my opinion that you really start to heal and deal with what you're going through for help. And again, I get pushback on this, but this is just my opinion. For me, I've never gone through addiction. I've never suffered from substance misuse. So when I say this, some people have a lot of pushback, but for me, I'm a big believer in the 12-step program. I'm
Okay.
not a I'm a big believer in the 12-step. Hey, Suboxone, taking methadone, that works for people. It does. And a perfect example of that is my older brother. He took Suboxone. He was on the methadone clinic for a while. But for me, I'm just a firm believer in the 12-step program and doing it naturally.
Okay, like that's understand, like you're not the only one thinking about, on that, and a lot of people share that view. I see a lot of advantage in the 12-step program. I go to AA personally. There are also other programs. I don't know if you heard of like the Smart Recovery Program.
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's not a program. It's not 12-step based, but it's very effective too. But yeah, all right. Go
I'll
ahead.
say this real quick. I think that not I think I know people who don't suffer from alcoholism or substance misuse, and they go to AA. They go to these meetings because you become a better person. They just sit in on these meetings because hearing people share their struggles and stories and how these meetings are conducted, you become a better person. So I remember someone saying that, and I sat in on a meeting once, and it was mind blowing, powerful stuff. So I that's just something I wanted to throw in there was that I know people who just go to these meetings because they're so powerful and they can change your life, whether you're going through something or not, because of what's said, because of the interactions and everything that happens in these meetings. So, that's just another thing that I believe is good about these meetings.
All right. No, I totally agree. The fellowship, the community is definitely
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
all right. Last thing, we're reaching the end of this interview. I wanted to ask you, so what's next with you? Where can we reach you? What do you have in the pipeline? Any conference, any other like show or TED Talk? I don't know. Like the floor is yours, basically.
Yeah, thanks. So what's up for me right now? I'm in the process of starting to very soon starting to write a book because I've yet to find a book that helps youth who are struggling or in stressful, tough moments break down how to ask for help. And so I said, all right, this needs to get out there. So I'm in the process of writing a book right now. The three
Amazing.
steps of the 3 steps of speaking up and asking for help for them. So that's going to be a while because I wanted to be impactful. I really wanted to help those youth and older, you could say, well, youth meaning high school, middle schoolers, and college kids be able to speak up and ask for help, but also adults can use it too. But it's going to be tailored towards that age group of middle school, high school, and college kids. And right now, yes, I'm in the process. It's the summertime. I'm heavily booking speaking engagements for conferences for high schools, middle schools, college students, and student athletes. And if anybody's interested, if you'd like to hear more or you'd like to contact me to book me, you can reach me at Eric at thedecisionswemake.com. That's my email. So ERIC at all one word here, thedecisionswemake.com. I'm on all the social medias. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. Just Eric Daddario, and you'll find me. So that's kind of what's going on and where I am right now.
All right. I'm gonna actually also put those handles on the description of this episode. Eric, I would like to thank you very much for being the guest on my podcast. I really love this interview. Yeah, like you definitely made some valid points, especially when it comes to the idealization that we have of athletes and what they're dealing with, like also like the desire of fitting in, how we can influence people who don't want to uh who are not taking the risk of um falling into addiction seriously. Yeah, before we conclude, do you have any question for me?
No, no, this is a great interview. I think there's a lot of value here and a lot that people will be able to hopefully get from this.
All right, Eric. Thank you. And guys, I will see you for the conclusion. Bye. All right. That was episode 31. Thank you very much, Eric, for your very insightful take on the youth, the addiction among the youth student at least, and your input on how to approach them and how to help them. I put all the contacts if you would like to reach out to Eric in the description. And guys, as usual, please follow us on social media and on Patreon, please. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.